The morning it started, I was standing at my kitchen sink with my hands under hot water, rinsing a coffee mug I hadn't used in a week. I kept doing small, pointless chores like that after Evan died. I'd wash something that was already clean. I'd straighten a stack of mail that I wasn't going to open. It gave my body something to do while my mind stayed somewhere else. My phone was face down on the counter. It had been buzzing all morning, but I didn't flip it over. Then, 3 days after the funeral, I walked into my sister's rental house for her baby's first birthday party, and she lifted her glass like she was making a toast. She smiled at the room and said, very clearly, "Before we do cake, everyone needs to know Noah's father was Evan." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just stood there, still holding a small gift bag with tissue paper, and let the words land the way they were meant to. People turned toward me like I was something they needed to read, like my face was supposed to explain what the rest of them didn't know. My sister, Maya, kept smiling. The baby, Noah, was in a high chair with frosting on his fingers, kicking his feet against the tray like nothing in the world had changed. I remember thinking one simple thing: this is not a conversation she planned to have in private. And I also remember a detail that didn't make sense until later. My husband's attorney had called me that morning and left a message saying he needed to speak to me about a sealed instruction packet Evan had dropped off months ago. At the time, I didn't even know what that meant. All I knew was that I was standing in a living room full of people, and my sister had just tried to rewrite my marriage in one sentence. I stayed quiet anyway. Not because I didn't have anything to say, because I did, but because I wanted to hear what she was going to claim next. Evan died on a Tuesday in early March. In Raleigh, the air still had that winter edge to it, even when the sun was up. The house felt dim in the mornings, like the light had to work harder. I woke up to silence. Not peaceful silence. Wrong silence. Evan always made noise when he slept. A soft snore, a slow exhale, the sound of him shifting onto his side. I used to nudge him and he'd mumble an apology he didn't mean. That morning, there was nothing. I reached over without opening my eyes, touched his shoulder, and felt cold where there should have been warmth. My brain tried to correct it, to tell me he'd just thrown the blanket off, that the room was chilly, that I was overreacting, but my hand knew before my mind did. By the time the paramedics arrived, the bedroom smelled like the sharp, clean scent of latex and winter air. One of them spoke gently, like volume could change reality. Another one asked me to sit down, and I remember staring at the edge of our dresser, at a small scratch Evan had promised to sand and stain one weekend. The word they used was aneurysm. Quick, no pain, in his sleep. People say those things like they're comfort. They aren't. They're just words that float around the room after everything solid is gone. The next few days turned into a blur of casseroles and sympathy cards and unfamiliar voices saying my name like they knew me. And Maya was everywhere. She was my younger sister by 4 years. We weren't estranged, but we weren't close in that steady, relaxed way some sisters are. She'd always had a restless energy. New jobs, new plans, new relationships that burned hot and disappeared fast. Still, after Evan died, she showed up like she was part of the foundation of my house. "I'll handle the florist," she said, taking my phone out of my hand before I could answer. "You need to eat something," she insisted, sliding a plate toward me even when my stomach felt locked. On the second day, she went straight into Evan's home office like she belonged there. She opened drawers. She scanned shelves. She stood too close to his desk. "Where does he keep the important papers?" she asked, light and casual, like she was asking where we stored the extra batteries. I didn't even lift my head at first. I was sitting on the couch, staring at a spot on the wall where the paint looked slightly darker. "The lawyer will need the deed to the house," she continued. "And the will. You know where he kept the will, right?" Everything in me was slow. "Safety deposit box," I said. "At the bank." Maya paused with her hand on a drawer handle. "Everything?" "Evan liked it that way," I told her. "He said it kept things simple. Her face did something small, tightened for half a second, then smoothed back into a polite smile. "Smart," she said, always thinking ahead. What I didn't tell her was that Evan had sat me down 3 weeks earlier, completely serious, and said, "If anything happens to me, don't let anyone rush you about money, not even family, especially not family." At the time, I laughed and told him he was being dramatic. Now, sitting in the quiet after the funeral, I kept hearing that sentence like it was stuck on repeat. The day after the service, Maya showed up at my door at 7 in the morning with 2 coffees and Noah on her hip. "You shouldn't be alone," she announced, walking past me into the kitchen like she'd always lived there. Noah was a sweet baby. Round cheeks, curious hands, the kind of kid who looked at your face like it mattered. Maya set him in a high chair and started talking while she snapped a bib around his neck. "You know Evan really loved Noah," she said, not looking at me. He always said Noah reminded him of himself. Evan had met Noah a handful of times. 2 dinners, a holiday, a quick visit when Maya stopped by unannounced. I didn't argue. Not yet. I just watched my sister mash bananas with a fork and move too comfortably in my kitchen. Then she said, in the same casual tone, "Have you thought about what you'll do with that big house by yourself?" I felt my throat tighten. "It's my home," I said. "Of course," she replied quickly. "I just mean, it has to be worth a lot now. What, 800,000? Maybe more?" I didn't answer. Maya glanced up like she was checking my reaction, then looked back down at the baby. "Maintenance, taxes, it's a lot for one person. Still calm, still controlled," I said. "I'm not selling." Her eyes flicked to me again. "No mortgage, right?" I should have wondered why she cared. Instead, I just said, "We paid it off last year." That was the moment her expression changed. Not big, not obvious, just a quick brightening, like something had clicked into place. "Wow," she whispered. That's wonderful." A few hours later, after she left, my phone buzzed again. A text from Maya. "You should probably get Evan's will from the bank before Saturday, just for peace of mind." I stared at it for a long time without replying. Then I set my phone face down on the counter, and I listened to the house go quiet again. Saturday came faster than I expected. The sky was low and gray, the kind of morning where everything feels muted before it even begins. I sat in my car outside Maya's place for a full minute after parking, engine off, hands still on the steering wheel. I could hear laughter through the open windows. Music. The normal sounds of a child's birthday party. I told myself I was there for an hour. No more. Inside, the house smelled like vanilla frosting and coffee. Bright paper banners hung crookedly across the living room. Someone had put too many balloons in one corner, and they bumped softly against the ceiling every time the heater kicked on. There were maybe 20 people there. A mix of my mother's cousins, Maya's coworkers, a few neighbors I didn't recognize. Everyone looked at me with that careful expression people wear when they don't know what to say. Maya spotted me immediately. "Claire," she said, using my name like a greeting and an announcement at the same time. She leaned in, kissed my cheek, and held me there half a second too long. "I'm so glad you came." "I said I would," I replied. She was wearing a red dress, not inappropriate, but deliberate. The kind you wear when you want to be noticed. She turned to the room, tapped her glass with a spoon, and said, "Everyone, before we wake Noah for cake, I just want to say something." That's when she said it, that Noah's father was Evan. I felt the room shift before anyone spoke. A collective inhale, eyes moving. Someone near the couch whispered, "Oh my God." I didn't move. I didn't need to. The stillness did the work for me. Maya kept talking, filling the silence with practiced words. She said Evan had been involved, that he wanted to do the right thing, that he had plans. My mother stepped closer to me, her hand hovering like she wasn't sure whether to touch my arm or not. "He does have Evan's eyes," she said softly, like that settled something. I looked at her. Mom, I said evenly. He has brown eyes. She nodded too quickly. I know, I just meant... I let it go. There was no point correcting her yet. Maya reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. I wasn't going to do this today, she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound convincing. But since the truth is out, I think it's only fair everyone understands what Evan wanted. She slid papers out of the envelope and held them up like evidence. A will, she said. Evan's will. I noticed details in moments like that. The way her hand shook when she gripped the pages. The way she stood slightly angled toward the room instead of toward me. This wasn't about convincing me. This was about witnesses. When did he write that? I asked. 3 months ago, she replied immediately. After Noah started walking, it changed him. 3 months ago, I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, order. Who prepared it? I asked. She hesitated. Another firm. Evan wanted discretion. I nodded once and said nothing else. I took the papers when she offered them. The weight of them felt wrong, too light, too thin. The letterhead was unfamiliar. The signature looked close enough to pass at a glance, but not close enough to fool someone who'd watched Evan sign documents for 12 years. I flipped to the last page. The date caught my attention first. March 15th. I looked up. That was the day we flew to California. So? Maya said quickly. He signed it before. It's notarized at 2 p.m, I replied. We were in the air. Her mouth opened, then closed. He could have signed earlier and... The notary has to witness the signature, I said calmly. That's how notarization works. A murmur moved through the room. Maya pressed her lips together. You're nitpicking. No, I said. I'm reading. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I didn't look at it yet. Maya lifted her chin. Even if you don't like the timing, Evan wanted to provide for his son. That's what matters. I finally took my phone out. A missed call, a voicemail, then a text from Evan's attorney, Mark Holloway. Please call me before you leave the party. This is important. I put the phone back in my pocket. Can you tell me which attorney prepared this? I asked again. Maya's jaw tightened. Does it matter? Yes, I said. It does. She exhaled sharply, then named a firm I'd never heard of. I didn't challenge it out loud. I just folded the will carefully and handed it back to her. Thank you for showing me, I said. That seemed to confuse her more than anything else. She'd expected denial, or tears, or a scene. Instead, I walked to the kitchen sink, rinsed frosting off my fingers, and stood there listening to the sounds of the party restart behind me. Laughter, plates clinking, someone saying it was time for cake. In my pocket, my phone buzzed again. This time, I stepped outside to answer it. Mark didn't waste time. Claire, he said. Evan anticipated this. I leaned against the cool siding of the house and closed my eyes. He left documentation, Mark continued. Medical records, instructions, a sealed letter. He told me to open it if anyone ever made a claim against the estate or alleged paternity. I didn't speak. Are you somewhere private? He asked. I am now, I said. Good, he replied. Because the next part matters. I looked back through the window at my sister holding her son, smiling for the room. And I listened. Mark's voice stayed even, almost clinical, like he was careful not to rush me. Evan updated everything 6 months ago, he said. Not just the will. He documented concerns, patterns, specific instructions for me. I watched through the window as Maya adjusted Noah's bib, laughing at something someone said. She looked relaxed, confident. What kind of concerns? I asked. Mark paused. He was worried someone close to you would try to take advantage after his death, financially or legally. I felt my grip tighten on the phone, but my voice stayed level. Did he name anyone? He didn't need to, Mark said. The documentation speaks for itself. I asked him to be specific. Mark explained it step by step, the way Evan apparently had. Medical records first. Evan's vasectomy. Not just the procedure, but the follow-up testing. 2 labs, 0 sperm count, confirmed, documented, filed. He insisted on redundancy, Mark said. He wanted no ambiguity. I stared at the damp grass near my shoes. The rain hadn't started yet, but it smelled close. That alone makes a paternity claim extremely unlikely, Mark continued. But Evan went further. He anticipated forged documents, fake legal filings. He asked me to prepare responses in advance. I let out a slow breath. So the will she showed isn't real? No, Mark said. And the firm she named doesn't exist in this state. I checked. Inside the house, someone lit candles on a cake. The glow reflected faintly against the window. What do you want me to do? I asked. Mark didn't hesitate. Nothing yet. Let her finish. Let witnesses hear everything she's claiming. That matters. I understood immediately. Silence, I said. Yes, he replied. Silence is useful. I stayed outside until someone opened the door and called my name, saying cake was ready. When I went back in, the room smelled like sugar and melted wax. People were crowded close together now, plates in hand. Maya was holding Noah, bouncing him lightly on her hip like a prop she knew how to use well. She caught my eye and smiled, not warm, expectant. I took a seat on the arm of a chair near the wall. I didn't stand beside her. I didn't correct anyone. I watched. Mom leaned down next to me. Sweetheart, she whispered, if this is true, maybe we should talk privately. We will, I said. Just not now. She nodded, uncertain. Maya cleared her throat again after cake, like she wasn't finished. There's one more thing, she said, her voice softening. Evan wanted Noah to have security, stability, and since the house is fully paid off, that was when I stood up, not quickly, not sharply, just enough to change the shape of the room. I have a question, I said. Everyone turned. Maya stiffened. Okay. Who notarized the will? I asked. She blinked. What? The name of the notary, I repeated. It's on the document. I want to be clear. She said the name, too fast. I took my phone out and typed, slowly, deliberately. There's no active notary under that name in this state, I said, still looking at my screen, or any neighboring one. A few people exchanged glances. Maya's smile thinned. You're Googling in the middle of... I'm checking, I said. There's a difference. She shifted Noah to her other hip. Claire, this isn't the time. You chose the time, I replied. The room went quiet again. I turned my phone so the nearest people could see the screen. Then another. Then another. That's not possible, Maya said. You're wrong. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, Mark is outside. That got her attention. Mark who? She asked. Evan's attorney, I replied. The one who prepared his actual will. Mom's hand went to her mouth. Maya laughed, short and sharp. Of course he is. Right on cue, the doorbell rang. No one moved at first. Then I walked to the door and opened it. Mark stood there in a gray coat, briefcase in hand, rain just starting to darken the shoulders. Good afternoon, he said calmly. I'm sorry to interrupt. He stepped inside, looked around the room once, and nodded. I believe, he said, we need to clarify a few things. I went back to my seat, and I waited. Mark didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush. He set his briefcase down on the coffee table like he was in a conference room, not a living room filled with half-eaten cake and confused relatives. Before I say anything else, he said, I need to be clear. I represent Evan Lawson's estate. I'm here because certain claims were just made publicly. No one interrupted him. Maya adjusted Noah in her arms, rocking him slightly. Her foot tapped against the floor, not fast, controlled. These documents, Mark continued, have serious legal implications. Maya scoffed. They're Evan's wishes. Mark nodded once. Let's talk about Evan's wishes. He opened the briefcase and took out a folder. Thick, labeled, organized. Step 1, he said, holding up a finger. Establish biological possibility. The room stayed quiet. Evan underwent a bilateral vasectomy with fascial interposition 2 years prior to Noah's birth, Mark said. Follow-up testing showed complete azoospermia, 0 sperm count. Someone near the window whispered, "What does that mean?" "It means," Mark said simply, "there is no biological path for paternity." Maya laughed again, but this time it didn't land. "Procedures fail." "Which is why," Mark replied. Evan repeated testing, at 2 separate labs, and again 6 months ago when concerns were raised. My sister's foot stopped tapping. Mark flipped a page. Step 2, he continued. Verify document authenticity. He held up the will Maya had presented earlier. The law firm listed here is not registered, he said. The notary does not exist in our state database, and the signature does not match Evan's verified legal signature on file. A low murmur spread across the room. Maya's voice came out sharper now. You can't just say that. I can, Mark replied, and I can prove it. He placed a second document beside the first, then a third. These are Evan's actual filings, he said. Executed properly, witnessed, notarized. I stayed still. Mark glanced at me briefly, then back to the room. Step 3, he said. Intent. He opened another folder. Evan left sealed instructions to be opened if anyone contested his estate or made a paternity claim. Mom spoke for the first time in a while. Did he think this would happen? Mark hesitated just enough to be honest. He was concerned, he said. Yes. Maya shook her head. That's ridiculous. Mark turned to her calmly. Ms. Lawson, before today, did you ever ask Evan what would happen to his assets if he died? She didn't answer. Did you ever inquire about the house, the mortgage status, or his insurance policies? Silence. Mark continued anyway. He documented repeated financial questions, requests for access, uninvited visits to his office. I felt my shoulders drop slightly, not from relief, from recognition. He also documented inappropriate personal comments, Mark added, and asked me to retain records. Maya's face flushed. That's a lie. Mark looked at her steadily. We have messages, logs, security footage. The room shifted. People stepped back without realizing they were doing it. Noah started fussing in Maya's arms, sensing the tension. This is harassment, she said weakly. This, Mark replied, is evidence. He turned to me. Claire, he said, you have options, but before we discuss those, there's one more point that needs to be addressed. He picked up the forged will again. Presenting falsified legal documents with intent to obtain property constitutes fraud. The word sat heavy in the air. A woman near the door whispered, That's a felony. Maya's eyes darted around the room. You're all overreacting. Mark shook his head. No, we're being precise. He closed the folder. At this point, he said, there are witnesses, recorded statements, and documentation prepared in advance. Maya's grip on Noah tightened. I didn't have a choice, she said suddenly. I'm a single mother. I spoke for the first time in a while. You had choices? I said. You just didn't like them. The room stayed quiet. Mark turned back to me. Would you like me to contact the district attorney now, or would you prefer to proceed differently? I didn't answer right away. I looked around the room, at my mother, at the people who had come for cake and stayed for something else entirely. Then I said, there's one more thing I want clarified. Mark nodded, and I took out my phone. I didn't raise my phone like a weapon. I just held it loosely in my hand. There's a recording, I said. Maya's eyes locked onto it immediately. Of what? Of this conversation, I replied. And the parts before it. Her mouth opened, then closed. That's illegal, Mark answered before I could. In this state, only one party needs to consent. Claire consented. The room felt smaller then, like the air had thickened. I looked at my sister. You announced your claim in a room full of people, I said. You brought documents. You named amounts. You made it public. She shook her head. You're trying to scare me. No, I said evenly. I'm explaining the situation. No one interrupted. That was the strange part. Even Noah had gone quiet, resting his head against Maya's shoulder. I continued, still calm. This isn't a debate. There's nothing to argue. Biology, documentation, and timelines don't negotiate. Maya laughed, but it cracked halfway through. You always think you're smarter than everyone else. I don't, I said. I just prepare. Mark stepped slightly forward, not crowding her, just closing the distance enough to be felt. Ms. Lawson, he said, here are the facts as they stand. A forged will was presented. A false paternity claim was made. Both actions were witnessed. Both are supported by counter-evidence. Maya looked at our mother. Mom, say something. Mom's voice was quiet. Is it real, Maya? Silence. That will, Mom continued. Is it real? Maya looked away. That was enough. Mark opened his folder again. At this point, I am obligated to explain potential consequences. Forgery of estate documents is a class felony. It carries both criminal and civil penalties. Maya's shoulders slumped slightly, like the structure holding her up had finally given way. I was drowning, she said. I needed help. I nodded once. You needed help, I agreed. You didn't need to lie about my husband. She looked at me then, really looked. You have everything. I had a husband, I said. Now I don't. That landed harder than anything else had. Mark closed the folder again. Claire has discretion in how this proceeds. Maya's voice dropped. What does that mean? It means, Mark said, the district attorney can be contacted today, or an alternative can be arranged. I thought in steps, the way Evan always had. Step 1, stop the threat. Step 2, secure the record. Step 3, protect the future. I'm not calling the police today, I said. Maya exhaled sharply, relief flashing across her face too quickly. But, I continued, you're going to write a full confession. Here. Now. With witnesses. Her relief vanished. You'll acknowledge the forged will, I said. The false paternity claim. The intent. Mark nodded. The document will be sealed. If you ever make another claim against the estate or attempt contact regarding assets, it will be released. That's blackmail, Maya said weakly. No, Mark corrected. That's a conditional forbearance. I looked at Noah. His fingers were curled around Maya's necklace, tugging gently. This isn't about punishing you, I said. It's about ending this. Maya's eyes filled, but she didn't cry yet. She looked around the room one last time, searching for support. No one stepped forward. Finally, she nodded. Fine. Mark handed her a legal pad and pen. Right, he said. And be accurate. She sat at the dining table, shoulders shaking as she began. I stayed where I was. Then I waited. Maya wrote slowly. Her hand shook at first, then steadied as the words became unavoidable. She didn't look up while she wrote. The room stayed quiet except for the soft scratch of pen against paper and Noah's occasional sniffle as he leaned against her chest. Mark stood nearby, not looming, just present. Every so often he'd say, "Be specific," or "Include dates." No one rushed her. When she finished, she slid the legal pad across the table without a word. Mark read it carefully, line by line. Then he nodded once and placed it into a folder. "This will be copied and secured," he said. "Multiple locations." Maya let out a breath that sounded more like collapse than relief. My mother sat down heavily in a chair. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "Why Evan?" Maya stared at the floor. "Because he was stable, because he had everything I didn't, and because I thought if something ever happened to him, it would be easier." Easier. No one responded to that. Mark turned to me. "The estate is fully protected," he said. "There are no outstanding claims. The house remains solely yours. All accounts are secure." I nodded. "What happens now?" Mom asked. "That depends," Mark said, "on boundaries being respected." He looked at Maya. "You are not to contact Claire regarding money, property, or the estate. Any communication goes through me." Maya nodded again, blankly. "And," Mark added, "any future attempt to revive this claim will result in immediate legal action." She whispered, "I understand." Noah squirmed, finally fussing louder now that the tension had broken. Maya stood, automatically bouncing him, her eyes red and unfocused. "I'm done here," she said. No one stopped her as she walked down the hallway and disappeared into the bedroom. The party ended quietly after that. No announcements, no arguments. People gathered coats and avoided eye contact, offering soft apologies as they passed me. "I'm so sorry," someone said. "We didn't know." "I know," I replied. When the house finally emptied, it was just me, my mother, and Mark. Mom reached for my hand. "I should have listened to you." I squeezed her fingers once. We all wanted things to make sense. Mark packed his briefcase. "Evan was very clear," he said gently. "He wanted protection, not chaos." Before he left, he handed me a sealed envelope. "He asked me to give you this if it ever got this far," he said. I didn't open it yet. That night, back in my own house, I made tea and sat at the kitchen table. The chair across from me was empty, but for the first time in weeks, the silence didn't feel sharp. I opened the envelope. Inside was a short letter, written in Evan's familiar, careful handwriting. "If you're reading this," it began, "it means you stayed calm. Thank you for trusting the plan." I folded it slowly and placed it back inside. Then I rinsed my cup, turned off the lights, and went to bed. The situation was finished. The consequences were set. And for the first time since he died, I felt something close to order again. The week after everything happened, the house felt different. Not emptier. Quieter in a way that made sense. I spent a morning opening windows, even though the air was still cold. I wiped down the kitchen counters, sorted a drawer that had been stuck for years, and stacked paperwork into clean, labeled folders the way Evan used to. Grief didn't disappear. It softened. It stopped shouting. I met Mark once more to finalize everything. The estate was locked down, the confession secured, and the forged documents were flagged so they could never resurface quietly later. We moved carefully, by process, not emotion. I also made one decision that surprised people. I set up a small trust for Noah, not for Maya, for him. It was modest, restricted, managed entirely through Mark's office. It would only be accessible for education or trade school when he was older. No early withdrawals, no exceptions. When my mother asked why, I told her the truth. Because he didn't choose any of this. Maya didn't contact me again. Through family, I heard she'd moved out of state and was working on things. I didn't ask for details. Her progress wasn't my responsibility. What mattered was that my life felt mine again. A few months later, I sold the house. Not because it was tainted, but because it had served its purpose. Evan and I had built a life there. Strong. Finished. I didn't need to stay inside it to honor it. I moved into a smaller townhouse with good light and quiet mornings. I learned how to make coffee for one without it feeling like a loss. I walked in the evenings. I slept through the night again. Eventually, I changed careers. I started working in estate planning support, helping people organize documents, anticipate conflict, and protect themselves before grief made everything harder. I didn't tell my story unless someone asked, but sometimes they did. And every now and then, I'd hear something familiar in their voice, a hesitation, a concern about a sibling or an in-law, or someone who asked too many questions about money. When that happened, I'd say calmly, "Let's document everything first." That advice came up again recently, when a friend mentioned her late husband's brother had suddenly become very interested in her property taxes. I didn't jump to conclusions. I just told her where to start. If you're listening to this and something about it feels uncomfortably familiar, trust that feeling. Preparation isn't paranoia, it's care. And if you've ever been in a situation where silence protected you more than anger ever could, you're not alone. If this story meant something to you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps these quiet, real stories reach the people who need them. I'd also love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Leave it in the comments. I read more of them than you'd think. 2 other stories are coming up next that you might recognize pieces of yourself in. Stay with me.